Hi and welcome to this episode of Condon UNSCRIPTED. My name's Ryan Condon, and in today's episode I'm going to talk about my recent ultra marathon race that I completed 6 days ago now. So yeah, it was the Thames Path Ultra Challenge, which was 100k along the Thames Path from Putney Bridge, which was the start line, all the way along the Thames, following a footpath preordained route along the Thames, finishing in Henley on Thames. And when you actually say that, if anyone that knows London, when you say Putney to Henley, it doesn't really sound that far. However, the route on foot is 100k, so it's a tough challenge. Now, I'm going to talk through. I've actually got some bullet points that I'm going to talk through. I'm well prepared for this episode. This is going to be a good episode. If you haven't done so already, I'd recommend watching the video for my race on my YouTube channel. It's also on my Patreon page. So the video itself is me running the 100k from beginning to end pretty much. And it is a race of two halves. I'm going to come on to that in a while. But it is a race of two halves in the sense that when you run 100k, to get the full sense of what it's like, you need to think about it in several different ways. The first thing is you never just run 100k. It's never that simple. If you rock up at a park run 5k, if you turn up at a organized 10k run, even a half marathon, there is an aspect which is you just rock up and run it. What can go wrong? The worst that can happen is that you just haven't trained enough and you don't get your PB. When you turn up to a 100k ultra marathon, and this is something which, unless you've done one, even if you've just done a 50k, even if you've done a 50k, as soon as you do something that's further than a marathon distance, you think about that distance in a different way. And what I mean by that is it's a race of two halves. So in the sense of the first half of the race, you think of it as how you would enter into a marathon, and you would prepare for the first half in that concept. So you think about pacing. I'm going to come on to this. So, if I'm skipping bits that you'd like to know more about, then stay tuned, because I'm going to talk about this in graphic detail. But you treat the first half as you would do a marathon. So you think about pace, you think about nutrition, you think about hydration in particular. Hydration, water is king. I said that in the video. And then the second half just becomes an endurance event. Second half is all about survival. It turns into a full-on Sky One, Bear Grylls endurance event. So that's what I mean about a race of two halves. And then in those two halves, it's broken down again into different sections where you're just thinking about the next iteration. You're thinking about where you need to get to next and the things you need to do to make that happen. Now, for this podcast, as I say, please go and watch the video that I made. I called it, what did I call it? Hang on, I'm going to quickly check. So the YouTube video I named Running a 100k Race, Am I Better Than Last Year? Now, the reason why I've asked the question, am I better than last year? This is actually the second time that I've raced this same exact event. It's organised by a company called Challenge Ultra. They're really, really good race organisers. They organise loads of different ultra marathons. But the thing is with this race, it's not just 100k. It's not, not everyone in it was running 100k. Some people were doing 10k. Some people were doing half marathon. Some people were just doing the first half, so 50k. Some people were doing the second half. So everyone I was running with, I tried my best not to pay too much attention to them because I wasn't 100% sure whether they were doing the entire 100k. So if they were running faster than me and they looked like someone I should be keeping up with normally, if I was doing a 10k or half marathon or even a marathon, I would try and pace to keep up with them, which is my competitive edge. And when I talk about tactics in a minute, I'll talk about my competitive edge, because my main focus for this race was to ensure that I didn't blast off the start line at a ridiculous pace, which is what I did last year. Last year, when I ran the Thames Path Ultra, I rocked up. I didn't really have a plan in my head, which in some ways helps me with a lot of these events, because ignorance is bliss. And, if you allow your anxiety and nerves to get the better of you, then sometimes that can, you're defeated before you've even started. So turning up and not knowing what to expect and just having fun with it is a big part of how I'm able to do these things. However, I did want to beat my time from last year. So to do that, I had to do things better than I did last year. which, makes sense if I'm going to beat my time. And one of those things was not shooting off the start line like a bat out of hell. And I did that really well. I controlled myself. So coming back to my point, which is that everyone around me on the start line, I didn't know what distance they were doing. Some were doing 100k, some were doing half, some were doing even less. So my priority was, do not allow my competitive side to make me try and keep up with people that were running faster than me, that potentially may not have been running the same distance as me. So yeah, that was priority number one when I rocked up at this race. Now, I'm going to talk about my preparation for this event. Now, my preparation, as I've mentioned already, my priority was to beat my time from last year. Now, last year, I ran it in just under 22 hours. No, sorry, I ran it in just over 21 hours. So I think it was something like 21:23 that I ran it in last year. Now, I say ran, the second half, the wheels completely fell off. Now, there's a couple of aspects to this. I'm not going to talk about last year because, again, that video is live on my channel. You can go back and watch it. It's a year old now. It's a good video. It's a really, really good benchmark for how far I've come in 12 months. So anyone that listens to my podcast because they're looking for inspiration about training, they're looking for ideas on how they can become better at what they're doing. I know a big portion of my subscriber base and people that listen to this podcast, I know that a lot of them are newbie runners, newbie cyclists, people that are trying to lose weight, all the great stuff that comes with entering into the world of fitness. So if you're listening to this and you want to see the progress I've made, then a really good barometer of that is watching my video from last year, my 100k Thames Path challenge from last year, which I called Can I Run 100k in a Heat Wave? That was the name of it from last year. And watching this one, which I uploaded a few days ago, having made it the day after I ran 100k for some strange reason. Rather than recovering, I decided to sit and make a YouTube video. So it's a good barometer. Now, one of the reasons last year that the wheels fell off was a couple of things. So the first thing I've already touched on, which is I entered into it with no real tactics. I knew that I had to be well prepared from a running perspective. I just did loads of running. I didn't have any strategy to what I was running or how I was running. I didn't focus on cadence. I didn't focus on leg strength. I just went out and ran. And I thought that if I just pretty much run every day, gradually building up that kind of distance, then being able to run 100k, it would just naturally happen. And that kind of did or didn't work. I could have been better with my strategy is what I'm saying. So the first half was actually, well, I say the first half, the first 25k of the 100k last year, I did really well, but I ran it far too fast. I came off the start line, I tried to keep up with people, and it ultimately ended in me completely burning out. My heart rate was too high for too long, and just fatigue set in a lot sooner than I would have wanted it to. So there's that aspect. Now, when you're running 100k, it's all about pacing yourself. Now, when people think about pacing, they think about cadence, they think about speed. Speed in particular. Pacing is all about running at a pace that you can sustain for a fastest pace that you can sustain for as long as possible. That doesn't mean run your 5k PB pace from the beginning, because this is not a 5k run. I've already mentioned that. So it's not just about speed, it's also about endurance and pacing your heart rate, pacing your the way in which you run, your comfortable running posture. I run very different if I entered into a 5k or 10k run. My posture is very, very different if I'm running a zone 2 or zone 3 run, for example. So obviously a 5k run is a zone 5 run where I'm maxing out, because it's only 5k, I can hold a high heart rate for that distance without burning out. I've trained really hard to be able to do that. I've lost enough weight to be able to do that. But when you're running 100k, you want to keep your heart rate down, because that ultimately depletes your stamina levels. Think of it like a computer game. If you had a power bar that gradually depletes over time, you want that power bar to deplete as slowly as possible. And to ensure that you don't hit the wall or become too fatigued too early, it will happen, by the way. There is absolutely no way you're running 100k without fatigue setting in. Unless you're Sally McRae, of course, who pretty much seems to just knock out 200-mile trail marathons, ultra marathons in her sleep. But unless you're Sally McRae, you want to keep your energy bar from depleting as slowly as possible, but it will hit zero at some point. And when that happens, you want that to be as far into the 100k run as physically possible. So that's the first thing, is about managing that expectation and managing that power level that you're putting into it. I will say really quickly, I'm going off on tangent here for the benefit of the podcast, I am wearing my Thames Path finishers t-shirt for this podcast. I got given this on the finish line, a very snug large that fits me like a misfitting glove. It fits me like the O.J. Simpson glove. Okay, so, and then the other thing was, I kind of ran with someone as well last year, which was a great experience. It was great to run with someone. He had a great personality. He was someone I'd never met before. You'd met him pretty much on the start, well, within the first 3K, and then we ran the rest of the race together. And if I'm honest with you, and I hope he isn't watching this podcast or listening to this podcast. However, it was great to run with someone, but I'm a solo runner and my pacing changed because of that. So when he became fatigued, then I had to slow down. And when I became fatigued, he had to slow down. And it kind of messed up both of our runs, I think. I don't know. I can't speak for him, but it definitely messed up mine. So I didn't like the concept of running with someone in that sense. I loved the camaraderie. I loved having someone to talk to, but that's not what I enter into these races for. I don't enter into them to chat to someone. I can do that on social runs, which I don't do, by the way. I don't do social runs. I'm a complete solo runner. But I could, if I wanted to, I could, get someone to come out and run. My daughters, for example, which again, they refuse pretty much to run with me because apparently I run too far and too fast, which is a compliment if ever I've heard one. But coming back to this, I ran with someone last year and it completely messed up my cadence. So this year, my preparation was to run solo, make sure that I hold a decent pace. I hold a competitive pace, but not one that's so hard and so fast that I burn out like I did last year. So I'm not entering into it with a suck it and see mentality. I'm not entering into it with, all guns blazing and just hope for the best. That's what I did last year. That's not what I did this year. So I had a planned pace. Now my planned pace was between 7 and 8 minutes a kilometre. Now for anyone that does a lot of long distance running, 7 and 8 minutes a kilometre is not fast. It's about just over a 10-minute mile. That is not fast, but it's a perfect pace for me because I can hold that pace. I know I can hold that pace for at least 50k comfortably without burning out. And that's pretty much what I did in this run. There was a couple of other factors as well, which was food. So nutrition. Last year, it was a heat wave. The video is called Can I Run 100k in a Heat Wave? It was the hottest day of the year. Now, going into this, psychologically, that was playing on my mind. Now, I knew from looking at the weather forecast, and I became obsessed with the weather in build up to this, which kind of added to the nerves. I don't really get nervous before an event. I might do 24 hours before. I'm normally pretty good at getting a good night's sleep. I kind of take them in my stride, excuse the pun. I don't get obsessed by them. But this one kind of was a little bit different because last year I had such a bad experience with it, which was one of the reasons I wanted to come back this year and try it again. But last year I had such a bad experience with it because of the heat wave. There were temperatures that were pushing 40 degrees last year. I remember at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it just being absolutely unbearable. And you were in a place last year where when I was running, I was trying to run from shadow to shadow, where the trees, when you was in a tree-lined pathway, which there are not a lot of on the Thames Path, there's quite a large portion of it, which is just completely open, and because it's running through London. But where there was tree canopy, it was okay. It was, I say, bearable. You didn't have the sun beating down on you like a scene from Lawrence of Arabia. But when it was open, I was running between trees. I was trying to run from, veering off to the side of the path to get under that shade, then veering off to that side, and it kind of just messed you up psychologically. And then when you saw the long, straight footpaths that had absolutely zero cover, I was in a place where I was thinking to myself, this is going to just be an ordeal for the next 2 miles because that's how far I can see that there's no cover. So it messed up in my head. And then the other thing was, because of the heat wave, I didn't drink enough. Physically could not drink enough water. I was sweating more than I could take on board. And even though I was carrying 3 litres on me, the more I drank, the more I sweat. Well, obviously I was sweating regardless, but I just couldn't drink enough. And that dehydration really started to kick in around the 25-30k mark, which, bearing in mind, you still have another 70k to go. And to be feeling that bad at that point was just horrendous. Watch the video, you'll see what I mean. I don't want to make this podcast about last year's run. I just want to set the scene about how psychologically tough it was before I even hit the start line. And a lot of people lose. I say a lot of people. I'm going to talk for myself here because I don't want to assume other people are in the same mindset of me. But one of the biggest things that I focus so hard on is my biggest strength when it comes to completing events like this. When people say to me, "You're crazy, I don't know how you do it," it's an abundance of confidence going into it. You have to be bordering on arrogance, completely unbalanced when you go into this event. When I go into these events, I genuinely put myself in a place where I think that I am going to run the best run I have ever run in my life. I'm going to be up there with the lead pack. I'm going to be on the podium. That's how I see it. Now, I know that's not going to happen. If you talk about between head and heart, in my heart, I'm going to be the best runner in the world. I'm going to be the next Sally McRae. In my head, I know that's not true because when I went into this event, I weighed 94 kg. No way I'm beating, the athletic 27-year-old who's been running all his life and trains for ultra marathons in his sleep. I'm not beating that person. But in my heart, I am. And that kind of gives me a power up. Again, thinking about it from a computer game perspective, if you've got your energy bar, you've then got your confidence, arrogance, power up. And that's what it gives me. It gives me the overabundance of confidence to just keep pushing through because I know I've got this. And that's what it boils down to, is it's complete and 110% belief that I've got this. There's no way I can't not finish it. As soon as the thoughts of this is too much, I've bitten off more than I can chew. And of course I've bitten off more than I can. I'm running 100k, guys. I weigh 94 kg, guys. I'm running 100k. Of course I've bitten off more than I can chew. But I don't allow those thoughts to enter my head. I've got no right to be running these kind of distances. Only 4 or 5 years ago, I weighed 30 stone. And I said this in my video. Again, if you haven't watched it, go and watch it. I said it in my video I made a few days ago, running a 100k race. I am privileged to be able to do this. There was a point in the race, I think it was about 30 or 40k, when I was crossing the bridge as I was coming up to Hampton Court. It's my favourite section of the race. It's early on in the race. I haven't reached the halfway point at this point, so I'm still feeling relatively fresh. And I reached Hampton Court Palace. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the Thames. It's completely no canopy whatsoever, but the temperature this year was okay. I think there was highs of about 22 degrees, so it wasn't scorchio. It wasn't, sexy beast hot. Movie reference there for anyone who hasn't seen Sexy Beast. And I was able to run this section and enjoy it, unlike last year. And it's just one of my favourite parts of the Thames. I said to camera at that point, I said, it is an absolute privilege. It is an absolute, I'm very proud and very grateful that I'm able to do this. Because one day I'll be too old to be able to do this. And even if I keep training, I'm getting one step closer to not being able to run these kind of distances. I know that I've got a finite timescale. I left it too late in life to be able to do these events in any competitive way. I am getting stronger every day, but I know that one day, no matter how hard I train, my body just physically will not be able to carry me to the finish line in the way that it can do at the moment. I've still got a long way to go. I've still got weight I want to lose. I still want to get stronger. I still want to become a better runner. I'm not the finished article by any stretch of the imagination, and I very much don't want this podcast to sound like I'm talking about myself as the finished article. I know I'm not, and I know that I've got a long way to go. I share these podcasts, I share these insights into what I'm doing as a journal of what it is that I'm doing. I get asked on my videos. My video of the 100k race was 26 minutes long. Now that's quite a long video. The race I finished, and I'll share the finish time now because I did finish it. The race, because hopefully you've watched the video, so I'm not giving anything away. I'm not spoiling it. The race I did, I smashed my time from last year. I smashed my 21 hour, 23 minute time last year, and I did it in just over 19 hours. So I took 2 hours off my time, which was amazing. I mean, that was an amazing accomplishment. But there was some aspects of the run where the wheels completely fell off again. So I know that I've got more in me. Now, again, I just want to share this as part of my journey, because a year ago, there's no way I could have run a 19-hour 100k race. There's no way I could have done that. And a year later, I'm able to do that now. And I was able to do it under extreme circumstances where something fundamental went wrong at a certain point on the race. I'm going to come on to that in a sec. So I've already talked about my preparation. I've talked about my pace. My pace was between 7 and 8 minutes per kilometre. I wanted to make sure that I drank enough. I was carrying my water with me. Ultimately, I ended up carrying more water than I needed. But that was a hangover from last year, because last year I physically couldn't get enough water on board no matter what I did. So this year I had that in the back of my head, so I carried more than I needed, but I was drinking plenty. I was consuming 2 litres between each pit stop. Now the pit stops were approximately every 15 kilometres. Some were a bit shorter in between, some were slightly longer, but there was approximately 3 pit stops before half. I say approximately, there were 3 pit stops before halfway, which was the 50k mark. Obviously the 50k mark is the big one. That's the one that everyone's aiming for. Either they're finishing there from the start line, or it's halfway point. Some people were some people were running the 70. There was a 73k pit stop, and I know from chatting to a couple of people on the start line and from reaching the pit stop and seeing people finish there, that some people were only running that distance. I say only. 73k is still mental. And then obviously there were people that were doing distances in between as well as the 100k. So reaching the halfway is the big benchmark pit stop. Now the first 50k went really well. When I arrived at the 50k halfway mark, and I'm going to talk about a couple of things that happened in between. When I arrived there, obviously I had my family waiting for me. So I had Tracy and my 2 girls that were there. And when I get asked, what advice would you give to someone running a 100k distance? My advice is always have someone there to support you. Some people, I don't know how many people run these distances without support. I don't think many. Everyone that I saw that I was running with had some kind of support. Either they were running with someone, so they had each other to bounce off, and they arrived at the halfway pit stop and they used all the facilities, because the facilities at the pit stops were phenomenal. And this is a great event for anyone that's looking to try their first ultra distance. The Thames Path is completely flat, like literally bulldozer flat. There isn't many trip hazards. There aren't any trails that are technical. There's no climbing. There's no hills to get over. There's no stairs to climb over like you do on trail marathons. I mean, it is made for entry level ultramarathon runners like me. So I highly recommend it to anyone that wants to give it a pop. Even if you just want to do the halfway distance, it's a phenomenal route. I will say, though, if you're only doing the halfway, you're going to miss the second half, which I think is probably the best of the two. First half, you're running through West London, so it's very very affluent. You're running through some of the most expensive properties, some of the most affluent areas in London, which is great because you get to see everyone on their yachts and their boats and out rowing. But I think the second half, especially as the sun starts to go down, the second half is the best half because it feels quite rural. And some parts of it are quite, I don't want to say creepy, but you're running through woodland. And I'm mentally, I know that I'm in London, but it doesn't feel like London. I mean, I could be running through a forest, in middle of nowhere near civilization. It feels like something out of Blair Witch at some points. Anyway, I'm not really selling the dream here. My point is, second half is very different to the first half. And the first half went really well. So I've mentioned arriving at the halfway pit stop. My children and my partner Tracy was waiting for me. They had everything prepared. When I say everything prepared, they've collected my bag from the bag drop for me. So all of my food, I don't eat what's at the pit stop at the halfway. And the reason why I don't do that is I don't want to mess up my digestive system, even though it had already been messed up in the first half. I don't want to mess up my digestive system by eating something that I haven't trained to eat. And this sounds strange, but if you haven't eaten it regularly over the last few weeks, eating something new could have a detrimental effect. And fried stuff, like a couple of pit stops had fried chips. Eating fried food is a game changer. Like within minutes of eating, chip shop chips, I can feel my stomach gurgling. So I didn't want to have that. It's all right on a Friday night when you're just relaxing, watching a movie and you fancy a bag of chips. I get that. But when you're running another 50k through quite rural parts of London or Greater London, I didn't want to have a pit stop in a bush, if you get my drift. I'm pretty explicit about this in the video. So the first half went well. Got to the halfway point. I've said this several. I've tried to cover the halfway point several times now, so I'm gonna try and tick this off. This is why I have bullet points, guys. This is why it's called Ryan Condon Unscripted, because the content of this podcast is stuff that doesn't make it into my YouTube video, and I get asked loads of questions. So I'm hoping that I get to answer everyone's questions by doing this podcast episode. So the first half went well. Arrived there, Tracy and the girls were there. She had my food ready. I had pasta, pretty much plain pasta with some broccoli, some steamed vegetables. And I also had some fake meat in there. Now, I'm vegan. I made a video about being vegan. I'm not going to talk about that now because I don't want that to become the subject of this podcast. My last episode 1 of season 2, was where I talked about being vegan with Tracy. So if you are interested in that aspect of my training or my life in general, then go and watch episode 1 if you haven't done so already. But I had some protein in there in the form of fake chicken. Now, fake chicken has protein stuffed into it at processing manufacturer. I don't eat a lot of processed food in my normal life. We try and avoid it. We try and eat lots of grains and lentils and vegetables, and being vegan, it's standard stuff. However, processed food has stuff stuffed into it, and it's great for when you're doing big endurance events. So I have all the vitamins and protein and probably all the other crap as well they put into it. But I've been training eating this stuff, so I know that I'm going to be able to eat it and it's not going to upset my digestive system. However, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I ate the day before. I had pasta the day before, so I don't know what caused it. But however, in the first half, I had terrible stomach cramps. When I was arriving at the halfway pit stop, I'd already done a number 2 again. I'm trying to be really careful about how I describe this so as not to put people off if they're eating their lunch or dinner while listening to this. Hopefully you're just at the gym on your commute to work or listening to it while you're pottering around in your garden shed. I don't know. But I did a number 2 early in the morning before I left, which was game changer. Number 1 priority when I wake up in the morning of a big event, a marathon, ultra marathon, whatever I'm doing, a big bike ride, number 1 priority is to accomplish a number 2. And I did that. Okay, it worked. I left my house that morning to go to the start line with a spring in my step. I felt 2 stone lighter. That's how well that achievement, that's how good that achievement felt. Now, achieving a number 2 before leaving the house is a game changer. However, when I reached pit stop 2 within the first half of this run, pit stop 2, my tactic was, from a nutritional perspective, was to have something to eat. Now, I did that. In pit stop 1, I'd already refilled my electrolytes, which was, again, part of my tactics. And I had a plan to eat at every pit stop. Now, when I say eat, pit stop 1, I was going to smash energy gels. So I had high carb energy gel, so I can replace my energy stores and make sure that I'm burning the right energy and I'm not using energy that I don't need to be using at this point, is my point. And it makes a difference. Smashing these high carb energy gels, so I had 2 of them. Now, I train with these, so they shouldn't upset me because I've used them before without issue. Yeah, this comes back to my golden rule, which is when you train for events like this, never use anything and this comes to kit as well. This isn't just about food. Never eat or train with anything, trainers, hydration vest, watch, literally anything that you're going to use on the day, train with it. Never change anything through nerves in the build up to it. So if you're a week away and you're starting to taper and your mind starts playing tricks on you, do I need a new pair of trainers? Do not change your trainers, guys. I've done that before. That is the worst thing you can do because you're just going to get blisters on blisters. Am I using the right watch? Is the battery going to last? Do I need to get a new hydration vest? Am I using the right electrolytes? Do I need to change my energy gels? Am I eating the right food? Maybe I've seen a YouTube video where it says I should be eating this instead of this. Don't change anything. If you have got to a week away or 2 weeks away even, or even a day away, and you've done everything you can do, even if you've got it wrong, it doesn't matter because changing it is probably the worst thing you can ever do. That's the best bit of advice I can give to anybody training for, even if you're doing couch to 5K, stick to your guns. Unless it's something fundamental like you've lost your trainers, I don't know how you lose trainers. I'm just thinking outside the box. Something horrendous has gone wrong. Your hydration vest has blown a seam and it's unrepairable. Or you've got a leak in your hydration bladder. Or your electrolytes, they don't make it anymore and you've run out. Whatever. Obviously, you can't avoid that. But I'm in general terms, just do not change anything. And I didn't. In build up to this, I changed nothing. I literally ate what I was training with, no issue. And these energy gels, Tracy said to me, and she's told me to say this on the podcast, she thinks the energy gels is what gave me the 2 bob bits, as my nan would say. And if you're from London, you know what I mean. And and I don't think it did because I train with them. I've used them before and I've had no issue. However, when I got to pit stop 2, I had something to eat. And the plan was that they have food there. They have sandwiches. And I ate a sandwich, which was onion bhaji, and in the video I said mint sauce, but it wasn't. It was mango chutney. So onion bhaji and mango chutney, and I had a packet of crisps, and it was just bread. So I don't think that could have upset me, and I don't think it was quick enough for it to go through my digestive system. Anyway, basically, cut a long story short, between there and the halfway pit stop, I got the worst kind of stomach cramps. My internal digestive system just completely imploded, and I was running from bush to bush. I didn't do anything, by the way, but I was just running from bush to bush in panic mode, where I was looking constantly for where there might be a public toilet. I was hoping that I'd pass a McDonald's on the Thames in the most affluent part of London. That's not going to happen. I was even considering running into like a B&Q on a retail park, because eventually we did run past a retail park for a very short period of time, and there was a B&Q there, and I thought, do I run in there? Do they have public toilets? I didn't want to waste time running aimlessly around a B&Q inside looking for public toilets that they may not even exist. So I decided to power on to the halfway mark, and it did make me run a bit faster. I did pick up the pace a little bit. I think at some points my pace even started with a 6, and I made it to the halfway point, and then proceeded to spend 20 minutes in the Portaloos. And I don't know if you've ever used a Portaloo. My goodness. They're things. I mean, I'm not a fan of public toilets. Who is? Who goes out thinking, I hope I get to use a public toilet today, especially for a number 2. It's bad enough, using urinals in men's toilets, standing in a puddle or someone else's. However, Portaloos, they're a different story. Straight off of a scene from Alvida Sempet, off a building site in the 1980s. I've got to be honest, I'll give Challenge Ultra their due. Their due diligence was excellent. They made sure that every toilet, I used them several times, by the way, and every toilet I used always had more than enough toilet roll. They always seemed really clean. It looked like someone was going in them afterwards to clean them as well. So credit where credit's due. They were as clean as a Portaloo can be. But considering that there were over 6,000 participants in this event, trust me when I say that these Portaloos were well used. So I spent longer than I wanted to using facilities that I didn't want to have to use. And it really affected me. And it meant that I lost time at the halfway pit stop. I don't know what caused it. Yeah, I don't know what caused my stomach upset. And I talked quite a lot about it on camera, which didn't make it into the finished video. So I touched on it. I did touch on it in my video, but I wanted to talk about it on the podcast. And I'm really sorry to anyone that's listening to this thinking, Jesus Christ, why do I listen to this guy? He's literally spent the last 15 minutes talking about having a poo. But it's a game changer. And imagine going out shopping with your missus or with your partner, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever. And you go shopping and you get a horrendous feeling. That overwhelming feeling where you start sweating and you get stomach cramps and your body is in countdown mode and it just goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, evacuation. That's what it felt like. And I was running along a really busy part of the Thames. At any moment, I thought, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to, it's going to be River Nile. Oh my goodness. I'm even grossing myself out. Anyway, I wanted to talk about it because it is a part of running ultra marathons. So that's kind of what was playing in my head when I got to halfway. However, the good news is, on the flip of that coin, let me change the subject quickly now. I felt really good other than my stomach cramps. Physically, I think it's the best I've ever felt at 50k. I'd run the entire 50k in a really, really, really good pace. I arrived at the halfway mark in just over 7 hours. And that's really good. I mean, that doesn't sound fast. But if I'd run the second half even with my stomach problems, even with spending 20 minutes in the toilet, and that included having to walk from where Tracy and the girls had set up camp to the Portaloos, which is a 5-minute walk across a campsite and a pit stop, which was huge, by the way. I mean, the facilities are unbelievable. They've got a marquee full of food and you can get hot food there. Anyway, even with all that going on, if I'd have run the second half in the same way that I'd run the first half, I'd be finishing in 14 hours. And that's mental. Or just over, probably 15 hours. And that's crazy. Now, I knew I wasn't running the second half in the same way I was running the first half. Even though I'd arrived feeling as good as I'd felt. And I felt really, really good. Like, no issue. I didn't even feel like I needed to sit down. Which, having run 50k at a good pace, was a surprise to me. But I did sit down. Once I'd composed myself after my adventure to the Portaloos, I managed to eat my pasta, and I ate everything, which I'm really pleased with. I over-indexed on the amount of food I brought with me, and I managed to eat all of the pasta. I had a packet of crisps to get some salt on board. I had salt tablets as well. I took them on, and it worked. I had loads to drink. I had some Lucozade, some fizzy pop, full of sugar, just to give me a bit of a boost and a bit of energy. And I set off again. I set off feeling relatively okay. Obviously, the only thing that was playing on my mind was my stomach issues, which I wasn't 100% sure if they'd been resolved. Ultimately, they had. I'd managed to flush through whatever had ailed me, whatever had upset my stomach. I still didn't feel 100%, and I'd also lost time, but it was okay. I was still on for a really good time. Now, what I did from my pacing perspective is I set my watch up to take me to the finish line in 18 hours. Now, I knew from last year, having run it in just over 21 hours, 20 minutes, I knew that I wanted to beat that. So I didn't just want to beat it. I wanted to get a sub 20. My aim was to come in under 20 hours, which would have been, that was the aim for last year. And I missed it, over an hour longer than I wanted to last year. So my aim was to beat 20 hours. But I didn't just want to beat 20 hours, I wanted to smash 20 hours. So I put a time in, which I knew was probably unrealistic, which was 18 hours. And I put that into my Pace Pro, which is a setting on a Garmin watch and I stripped away everything else. I stripped away my exact pace, I stripped away my speed, I stripped away my heart rate, I stripped away everything except for my finish time on my watch and my average pace across the entire run. It was my average pace, not my exact pace at that moment, because when I look down at my watch and I'm going too slow at that moment in time, I'll try and run a bit faster, which may not be the case, because it may be that I'm going up a slight gradient, even though there aren't many gradients. I'm just using it as an example. It might be that I'm climbing steps up to a bridge that I need to cross. There could be many different. It might be that I'm running over tree roots and I've slowed down a bit because I don't want to go tippy tumble. So looking at my watch at that moment, I find psychologically is a negative more than a positive, because I start overthinking my pace. Whereas if I look at my average pace and I can see that across the last, I think it's over the last major period, if I look at that and it's good, I know that I'm doing well. And I set it to 18 hours. I set my pace to 18 hours to get me to 18 hours. And when I left the pit stop, I was ahead of schedule. When I arrived at the pit stop, I'd gained an hour. So if I hadn't stopped and I managed to carry on running the way I was running, I would have arrived, even if I walked actually, because my pace meant on the back end I could do a walking pace, a fast like power walk, and I would still arrive in under 18 hours. So I was going to smash this. Like, even if the wheels fell off completely and I was dying, as long as I did a fast walk, which I knew I was capable of, I was going to finish this race in under 18 hours. I mean, that's mental. However, and this is a big however, the wheels fell off in the second half. Now, I was expecting things to go wrong. I mentioned it at the beginning of this podcast episode, which is when you run a race of this distance, it's a race of two halves. I've already described the first 50k as being all about pace, all about nutrition, all about hydration. You're thinking clearly. All these strategies that you've got, that you've been thinking about for months and months, maybe even over a whole year, which is what I did. All these things that you plan, you put into practice in the first half. The second half goes out the window. Everything. I don't care how structured you are. I don't care how disciplined you are, how mentally strong you are. Everything you plan for as soon as things start going wrong, as soon as you start feeling blisters, hot spots, which thankfully, I was about to do touch wood, but I've done the run now. Thankfully, didn't happen. I didn't get any major blisters because I treated them. I did have some hot spots in the first, or was it the second pit stop? And I treated them really quickly. Again, that's in the video. And they didn't form into anything because I treated them. I also got them checked at the halfway mark, which again took time off me, but it was worth doing because it meant I finished blister free. Another tactic I did to stop blisters, I'm going to quickly touch on this now, it is a bullet point I've got here, is I changed my trainers at the halfway point. The first half of the run, and this comes back to another tactic, which is know the route you're running. I should call this episode How to Run an Ultramarathon, but to know the route you're running. And if you know the route, you can plan effectively for it. Now, I knew the first half was pretty much on concrete or tarmac or really well-maintained footpaths. There was no woodland trails. There was no long grass. It was also during the day as well because I set up at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I had the entire day to run this course in the sunlight, in the warmth, there's no rain forecast. So I knew that I could run it with road trainers, which is what I wore, which is, road trainers are made for speed, whereas trail trainers, which is what I swapped into at halfway, are made for trails. And the reason why I swapped into them is twofold. Firstly, everyone's feet, when you run long distances, they swell up and they fill the shoe, which is what causes blisters that you don't normally have in training. And I knew from previous experiences that my road trainers are tighter than my trail trainers. My trail trainers have wide toe box. They're made by Ultra, and Ultra are famous for having wide toe boxes, and that's why I have them. Because when I run trail marathons, I need my toes to spread out so I've got grip over the tough terrain. So I changed into them. 2 reasons. First reason is to give me more space to be able to allow my feet to spread out now because they were swollen. And that happens to everyone running long distances. Even David Goggins, famously on his big, the race that he's most famous for, his feet swelled up and he didn't change his trainers and he got these really, really bad damaged toes and feet, and so I changed my trainers for that reason. And the second reason is the second half of the run, so the last 50k, especially the last 20k, is over some quite rural fields along the Thames in the dark. And when the sun sets, obviously all the change in temperature and the change in weather from day to night and the cloud cover as it comes in causes mildew and damp grass. And the long grass, as you're running through it, because you're running through on trails that are literally this wide, literally, as narrow as 1 foot. So when you run with 1 foot in front of the other. And when you're tired, you don't always do that. So you end up putting your feet in the long grass, and that's where your feet get really wet. So my trail trainers are 100% waterproof. And I've made them waterproof as well. I've because they're at the end of their life. What I've done is I've bought them. They're water resistant, but they're not waterproof. And I learned that when I first ran in them. So I've got waterproof spray, and I sprayed my shoes to within an inch of their life. Like literally, the waterproof spray was dripping off them. I soaked them and then allowed them to dry overnight the night before. So they were they were like as good as wetsuit shoes. I could have gone scuba diving with them, and my feet would have stayed dry. That's how waterproof they were. So with the exception of water, of it pouring down and water running down my leg into my shoe, if I was running in long grass, my feet stay dry. And what that means is wet feet 100% equal blisters. I don't care how well prepared you are. If you've got wet feet to the point where your skin starts doing that stuff, that thing it does when you get in the bath and you lie there for too long, they start pruning. If your feet become like prunes in your shoe, they start blistering. And it's something which I've learned over time is you can't treat that. There's nothing you can do because your feet are soaking. So shy of stopping, allowing your feet to dry out, and then treating them with blister plasters or rock tape, which won't stick in wet feet, there's nothing you can do except power on, which makes it worse. So I changed my trainers for that reason. 100% worked. And that's a top tip for anybody looking to do an ultramarathon distance. Change your trainers at halfway if you think you're going to be running on different terrain to what you were running on during the day. If you're running on perfectly formed footpaths like the first half was, and you're doing that overnight, then the mildew isn't going to affect you in any way. So you can keep your road trainers on probably, unless it's going to pour down. In which case, change to trail trainers and do everything you can to keep your feet dry within reason. However, the big plot point of the video and the plot point of this podcast was that at 65k, between 60 and 70k, I decided to full on drop kick a massive rock that was in the middle of the trail. Now, when I was talking to camera, I've got my stick here actually. So I've got my stick here. I've got for those of you that are listening to audio only, I make my podcast for video as well. So I'm just showing those that are watching on video the selfie stick. I'm literally just holding a GoPro selfie stick. It's actually a DJI Osmo Action. That's the camera I use now, and it's got a really good mount. It's got a magnetic mount, but when I do is I talk to camera like this. I'm running along talking to camera like this, and obviously not looking at the floor. Now, you don't always need to look at the floor, but I shouldn't have been doing it. I was running on a kind of an undulating wooded trail section. It wasn't footpath. Well, it was a footpath, but it wasn't well maintained. It was tree rooty, and it had rocks and stones, and there was an iceberg stone. Now, an iceberg stone is one of those stones that's half buried, so when you kick it, it doesn't move. If you kick a big boulder, it's annoying and it can be a trip hazard, but if it moves, it gives way and it means that you have some control. If you kick one that's half submerged, that's not moving. It's like kicking a brick wall, and instead of tripping over, which would have relinquished some of the power that went into the stone between my toe and the stone. If I'd have tripped over, that probably would have been better. I didn't fall over. I full on Johnny Wilkinson drop kicked it, and I nearly broke my toe. It felt like at the time that I broke my toe. Now, I've shared a picture of it. I'm not going to do a picture now. I've shared a picture of it in my video. Again, hopefully you've watched the video so you'll know what my toe looked like. Black and blue. I thought I broke it. The pain was unbearable. I destroyed my toenail. Toenail looks like it's disintegrated. It's black. The toenail's gone black. I've had people say to me, well, you need to get that checked out. I mean, the toenail is dead at the root, so that's going to fall off. And I thought I broke my toenail. I haven't, so I want to share this now. I've had lots of questions about how's the toe. My toe is not broken, luckily, thank God. I did have it checked out. It is recovering well. It was just really, really badly bruised. Even the doctor asked me how I did it, obviously, but he was more inquisitive. He was more curious about what the hell I was doing that caused me to drop kick a stone. But he said that, yeah, I was very lucky. He couldn't believe it wasn't broken, but it wasn't. I managed to get away with it, but it meant at the time, so I'm okay now, I'm recovering well. I actually went on a Zwift ride yesterday. I'm 6 days after the event, and I had a big Zwift ride yesterday, and I felt fine. I actually went for a run 2 days ago just to stretch my legs out. And again, my toenails are sore, but other than that, the run was fine. However, it completely changed the dynamic of the run. So I'd got to over 60k into this run, running really well. All of my tactics were working perfectly, and now I had damaged my toe to the point where I actually thought I'd broken it at the time. I genuinely thought I'd broken it. The pain was unbearable. I couldn't put it on the floor. I badly bruised it. I had damaged it. It's still recovering now. I'm still not 100%, even though I'm happy to give it a run out and, go for a Zwift ride, but it still was very sore. And at the time, the pain was unbearable, and it completely changed my run. So it meant now that I wasn't able to run on it. I tried to run on it, and the pain was just shooting up my leg, and I'm not going to go into graphic detail because it makes me sound like a right wimp, but it meant that I then had to do this weird hobble shuffle, and I still had another 40k to go to finish this run, to finish this race. And I knew, looking at my watch, it was breaking my heart, because looking at my watch, I was on for at least an 18-hour finish, which would have been my bucket list. That would have been it, a big tick, and I could have put the Thames Path to bed permanently as being something that I had absolutely nailed, achieved, overcome. It wouldn't have been the end of my ultra running events. I would have done more of them in the future, but I would have had this ticked off as being a big accomplishment. And I was fit enough and strong enough and light enough to be able to do this. Yeah, not after I'd kicked this stone. So the rest of the race, I had two options. I either had to forcibly withdraw, and it was the first time in my head I actually contemplated pulling out. Now, originally, I didn't think I was going to be able to finish it with the pain. It was unbearable. I popped some painkillers, and I said to myself, right, I'm going to get to the next checkpoint. And the next checkpoint was still 10 or so, I think it was about 12 or 13k away. So it's still a long way. I still had to do a significant distance. I was still looking at, 6, 7, 8 miles of getting from where I'd kicked the stone to the checkpoint. And I knew if I could get to the checkpoint, because I wasn't thinking clearly and I was tired and fatigued, and I get something which is called brain fog, which I call brain fog, which is when you're that tired, you don't think clearly. So even simple things like changing a battery, because I had to put my head torch on because it was getting dark, even simple things like changing a battery became a really hard challenge. And all I wanted to do was get to the next pit stop. So I just kept walking. And eventually I was walking in pitch darkness. So I had to put my head torch on. That took time. I lost loads of time doing this. And I just watched my pace just go. It was slowly but surely dwindling with every step. I made it to the pit stop. And by this point, the painkillers had kicked in. And I'd managed to limp it this far. And I still had, at this point, I think I was at 73k. So I still had 27k left to go to get to the finish line. And I just thought, what the hell? I'll do it. I'll just keep walking. And I did this weird limp shuffle thing where I was trying to keep the pressure off my toe. Because at this point, again, I thought it was broken. So I'm trying to not make it worse. The pain also helped with the fact that I didn't want to walk on it because it was unbearable. Every time I put pressure on the toe by accident, like when I tried stepping over a stone and missed because it was pitch black, or I was climbing steps and I was using my toe, forgot about the pain and used my toe. The pain just shot up my leg and it was unbearable. So just getting to the finish line, which I eventually did, and this goes to show how well I'd got to 65k or whatever it was where I decided to kick the stone. This shows how fast I got there. I finished this race. I eventually got to the finish line, tripping and shuffling and limping. My other leg started hurting because I was using the other leg to compensate for the left leg, which I'd hurt the toe on. My other leg really started hurting from all the limping. I eventually got to the finish line. In how I got there, I have no idea. I don't even remember most of it. I think I just zoned out and decided to disappear off into my own head and hope that my body eventually would get me there. I was on autopilot. I'd managed to get to the finish line in just over 19 hours. 19 hours and 23 minutes, I think it was. No, 19, just over 19 hours. I can't even remember. That's how disappointed I am in the time. Now, it was sub 20, and it was still 2 hours quicker than I did last year. And that goes to show how well I'd run the first half and started the second half. And if I hadn't have done that to my toe, I think I would have got my 18 hours. I think I would have got it. I'd lost so much time in shuffling to try and get to the pit stops in between. I didn't stop for any significant time at the pit stops. I stopped just long enough to take on more water. I didn't eat anything, which again was a game changer because I was so disillusioned by my toe injury. I was royally hacked off. I've barely filmed anything because I was in such a bad mood. I'd watched my pace just drop and drop and drop, which was killing me to the point where I'd changed my watch display so it just showed the map. I didn't even put my torch on for a big period. I was walking in pitch black. I mean, that's how disillusioned I was. And then to add on top of that, I didn't eat anything from 65k to the finish mark, which I was drinking water because I was thirsty, but I didn't eat anything. It was really cold when the sun had gone down. The temperature dropped to like 7 or 8 degrees. So it was starting to get really cold. And obviously with all the sweating, I was starting to feel cold. I was shaking. It was just awful. It was the awful finish to what had been a fantastic race. And it was just relief to get to the finish line. And I didn't care. When I got to the finish line, I didn't want to be rude to the officials because they had been standing out there all day, accepting my medal. Obviously, I was grateful to finish. I wanted to get my medal. I got my t-shirt, which I'm wearing. I got my finishers pictures, which are in the video. And I just said to Tracy was like, right, okay, let's go and see the medic because there's a medic tent there with like 5 medics all waiting. I wasn't interested. Tracy said, right, let's get something to eat because there's food there. There's hot food. I could order whatever I wanted. Wasn't interested. I just wanted to be bundled into the car like a prisoner transport in the middle of the night. I just wanted to get home. And that's what we did. We got in the car. I was in a bad way. The pain was unbearable. My right leg had started to hurt, which I'm now okay, which I'm really happy with my right leg because I was worried that I'd messed up the muscles in my right leg from all the limping. And I fell asleep in the car and I woke up about an hour from home. It was about a 3-hour drive to get home. I woke up about an hour from home with this overwhelming feeling of nausea coming over me. My body was obviously just, in a bad way. I hadn't eaten enough. I probably hadn't drunk enough. All my tactics, this is the point I'm trying to make, all my tactics from the first half versus the second half, race of 2 halves. I'd gone from being this really capable, competent ultramarathon runner who had plans and ideas and tactics to watching one of these Channel 5 documentaries about someone enduring the worst kind of circumstances and just trying to get the job finished. On hindsight, I probably should have got Tracy to just come and pick me up, but I didn't want to have a DNF against my name. I needed to finish the race, and that's ultimately what happened. I managed to finish, and that's all I cared about. That's the end of this podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't done so already, please go and check out my other episodes. I hope it was an insight into what running an ultramarathon is like. Please don't take my experience, because every experience is different. I will tell you now, I'll leave you on this, you'll never ever get out of an ultramarathon unscathed. There will always be something that you need to adapt to and overcome, as the army would say. But it's such a great experience. I'm pleased I did it. I smashed my time, and that's all that matters. Imagine what could be accomplished if I didn't kick a bloody stone. That'll be the aim for next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you in next week's episode.